Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're really diving deep into, well, the birth of a nation. We're looking at India's independence, zeroing in on that huge day, August 15th, 1947. The material we're working from today, it's a really concise historical account, almost like a timeline. It hits the key events leading up to India's freedom and what happened right after. So our mission here for you is to walk through that complex journey, how India went from, centuries of British rule to becoming independent. We'll highlight the key people, the big moments, and yeah, the very real profound cost of that freedom.
What's fascinating here is it's so much more than just a date. It's really a story of resilience, isn't it?
Yeah.
A massive struggle and the moments that actually built one of the world's biggest democracies. We'll look at not just what happened, but the human stories behind it all.
Right. Let's start right at the beginning or close to it. The British presence. Here's where it gets really interesting. The British East India Company shows up in 1600 CE, supposedly just as traders. But how does trade turn into control? How did that happen?
Well, the company's influence, it didn't just appear, it grew quite strategically. They often played on local rivalries, used their own private army, to get better trade deals. And those deals quickly turned into political control, administrative power.
Yeah.
A really key moment, a turning point, was the Battle of Plassey in 1757. After winning that, they started directly governing Bengal. And that really marked the start of proper British political dominance. Their whole game changed from just business to actually running territory.
Okay, so fast forward almost 100 years to 1857. And we see this first major uprising against that power. It's often called the 1857 Revolution or sometimes the First War of Independence.
Yeah, and that naming is interesting in itself.
It is. Does First War of Independence quite capture it? Was it really a unified national thing back then or more like lots of separate revolts that just happened to spark something bigger?
That's a really good question. It definitely started as, mutinies, local rebellions.
Yeah.
But the sheer scale of it showed this deep anger across many different groups, different regions, and maybe it wasn't centrally planned like a modern war, but it absolutely forced the British to completely change how they operated. But connect this to the bigger picture. This revolt was a huge turning point. It led directly to the British government taking over from the East India Company in 1858. That's the start of Crown rule. And by centralizing control like that, they sort of inadvertently created a single target, a unified them for Indians to eventually unite against. It shifted the fight.
So as British rule gets more official, more direct under the crown, the movements for freedom also start getting more organized.
Exactly.
What were some of those first big steps towards a unified political voice, something that really started pushing back?
Well, institutionally, a big one was setting up the Indian National Congress, the INC, in 1885. That gave a platform, for political discussion, making demands. But there were also key moments of just popular defiance, like the movement against partitioning Bengal in 1905. That really stirred up huge protests, showed the power of mobilizing lots of people against a specific colonial policy.
And that growing protest sometimes met, well, incredibly brutal responses from the British. The Jallianwala Bagh massacre, April 13th, 1919. It's just a horrifying example of that brutality.
Absolutely chilling.
So what does this all mean? What was the impact of something like Jallianwala Bagh on the movement itself? Did it change things fundamentally?
Oh, fundamentally, it wasn't just about anger, though there was plenty of that. It
Right.
really starkly showed the ruthless side of colonial rule. No masking it. It created this sense of urgency, that things had to change radically. And it's in that atmosphere, that really charged atmosphere, that Mahatma Gandhi steps up as this major leader. He starts the non-cooperation movement in 1920. And this was something new, a powerful new kind of resistance.
Nonviolent civil disobedience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A mass refusal to cooperate with the colonial system. It started to really shake the British foundations.
And we see that strategy in action, famously with the Salt Satyagraha, the Dandi March in 1930. What made that specific act, marching for salt, so incredibly powerful?
The Salt March.
Yeah.
It was genius, really. It's simple, symbolic. Salt is basic. Everyone needs it. Challenging the British monopoly on salt made the independence fight feel immediate, tangible for ordinary Indians everywhere. It wasn't violent. It was about mass defiance, showing the world, frankly, the moral weakness of the colonial power when faced with peaceful, determined opposition. And you see this intensity building leading up to Gandhi's big call in 1942, the Quit India movement. A very clear demand: British, leave now.
Okay, so we're getting closer. The final years, there's this convergence of things happening. World War II ends in 45. Britain is economically drained, politically weaker. Holding on to India is looking less and less feasible, right?
Precisely. The war cost them immensely. Plus, globally, the mood was shifting against colonialism. Britain just didn't have the same power, or, frankly, the will. At the same time, back in India, the anti-British movements were getting stronger, more intense, all across the board: political demands, civil unrest, you name it. So this pressure from both inside India and outside leads the British government to send the cabinet mission in 1946. And then finally, Lord Mountbatten arrives with a plan in 1947 to actually transfer power, basically setting a deadline for leaving.
And then, that moment, midnight, August 14th, turning into August 15th, 1947. Here's where it gets really interesting, that actual transfer. Tell us about those moments.
It's incredibly dramatic. At that exact moment, midnight, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru gives his famous Tryst with Destiny speech. You know the words? At the stroke of the midnight hour when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom. And with that, India officially becomes a free, sovereign nation. Nehru becomes the first prime minister. It's the culmination of, well, centuries of struggle.
Life and freedom. But that freedom, as we've touched on, came at a terrible price.
Right alongside independence comes the partition of India, the creation of Pakistan as a separate nation.
Yes.
What was the immediate fallout, the longer-term impact?
What's fascinating here is, well, fascinating feels like the wrong word, given the tragedy, but the timing. Even as people celebrated independence, this partition unfolds, leading to just immense human suffering. We're talking millions displaced. Families forced from homes they'd lived in for generations, people walking for days facing unbelievable violence just because a line was drawn on a map. Thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, lost their lives. So it was undeniably a bittersweet start. It created two nations, yes, but also this deep, enduring conflict and trauma that, still shapes the region today. Freedom arrived, but with this huge, tragic burden.
Wow, so we've covered almost 3 centuries. From a trading company arriving all the way to the birth of a new nation. It is an incredible story. Struggle, sacrifice, the human spirit, it's all in there. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, India's independence wasn't just contained within its borders. It really did send shockwaves globally. It inspired other decolonization movements all over the world, changed the whole geopolitical map, really. It's a powerful reminder, isn't it, of what collective action can achieve, but also the messy, often painful realities of building a nation. How one event can echo through history.
So what does this all mean for you, listening? This deep dive into India's independence, it's more than just history. It's a living story about people fighting for their own future, against massive odds. Maybe think about how the echoes of moments like these still shape countries, identities, conflicts today. And what other complex stories about freedom, about nationhood, does this make you want to explore next?